You hire a multi-threaded marketer, train them up, and their sole purpose is to achieve that outcome. When it comes to GEO or AEO, there are no workflows right now. You have to create the new workflows. Yes, you can leverage agents, but it's not as simple because getting visibility in LLMs is not a single variate problem. It's a multivariate optimization.
Given what you just mentioned and what we know today, Kady, as far as enterprise software purchasing is concerned, does it make any sense at all to spend on SEO?
AI is rewriting the rules of marketing. In this episode, Kady Srinivasan, CMO of U.com, reveals how to lead when AI moves faster than your team, from building multi-threaded marketers to mastering generative engine optimization. Because in the end, it's not just about smarter tools, it's about sharper judgment.
It's so lovely to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Vidya. I'm excited about the conversation.
Welcome to this edition of Founder to Fortune podcast. Kady, you have had an amazing career. Why don't you start by giving us an introduction about what's Kady done and what is she doing today?
So I started life as a software engineer and, I went to business school. And the idea of solving business problems seemed like a really cool thing to do. And I was doing a lot of different types of things. And I landed in the area of go-to-market and thinking about how to launch products, how to think about markets, how to think about marketing and all that stuff, and realized, this is actually kind of interesting. I'd like to make a career into it. And so I started to build my skill set, if you will, in marketing. From that point on, I still honestly don't know if this is where I'm going to end everything because I am a marketer now, but I also feel like there's probably something bigger than this that I'm moving towards. So, but along the journey, I worked in a lot of different kind of industries. I was in gaming, which is a completely different business model. It's all freemium business model. It's a very consumer-based business. Then I went to Dropbox, which is kind of this hybrid between consumer and B2B with the freemium to premium type of a thing. And then I went to Klaviyo, which was even a little bit more into B2B, so selling more into mid-market enterprises. And then then I went to Lightspeed, similar to Klaviyo, but it was a public company. I just wanted to get some experience as a CMO of a public company. And then I came here to U.com. And U.com is very interesting. We sell to developers and we sell to real enterprise buyers, CIOs. So it's a really very interesting both company from what we sell as well as the market we sell into. So that's what I'm doing now.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is such a broad spectrum, which is what makes this conversation so exciting, Kady. One of the things I wanted to get into right off the bat is the topic of ICP.
I think the first thing to realize is when we talk about ICP, we all define it very differently. Salespeople define it as which verticals to go after, what company sizes to go after, how many employees should a company have. It's more like a firmographic representation of the ICP, where marketers think about personas. Is it a CIO? Is it a CMO? Who is the decision owner? Who is the budget owner? And product people sometimes I'm thinking of all of them, but mostly they're thinking about what does the user journey look like? Am I building it for a very sophisticated user or for someone who is, a relative self-serve type of a user? So first thing, if I were in a founder's shoes, is really get the entire company aligned around what is that one single ICP, which also means, by the way, making a lot of trade-off decisions of what your non-customers are going to be, right? So you can say to a sales team, go and sell to companies in 3 verticals with employee sizes of X, Y, and Z, and do not entertain anything beyond that, disqualify every lead that comes in. But a lot of founders I see don't have that discipline because at the beginning stages of growing a company, you just want to grab anything and everything. And what happens when you try to grab anything and everything that comes, especially if it shows up to your door, is you're wasting a lot of valuable sales resources, customer success resources on businesses that don't probably make sense to you. And eventually the churn might go up. you get a brand hit. So my advice to most founders right now is make sure what that ICP is and stick to it. Make sure that you make the hard choices of disqualifying people who don't fall in that bucket, and it's okay to be narrow in the beginning, right? It's okay to be narrow and then start to expand. The worst thing you could possibly do is go and say, I'm going to sell everything to everyone because my platform is so infinitely extensible. And at the end of the day, you sell nothing to no one because nobody understands it.
Yeah, 100%. I think you just shared some very interesting things, and I actually didn't think about it until you mentioned it. The fact that ICP is not the same thing even within a company. I just realized as a former product builder myself, we did think about customer journeys, and because there are multiple touch points from pre-sales all the way to support, we did have to think about multiple different people who are not necessarily in the minds of the sellers or sometimes even the marketers themselves. So I think that aside, also your point about having to have discipline, that is easier said than done, right? What are some tips you can offer founders narrow their ICP? I mean, is it just about discipline? I mean, that's such a hard thing to do. Is there anything else that people can do to either narrow their ICP, or maybe it's just about invalidating some that automatically helps you validate others?
Yeah, I think a lot of founders have a burning vision and a kind of a sense of what they want to transform in the world. And so you start with that, and then you almost automatically attract a lot of early adopters to your platform or to your service, right? And so at that point, you kind of take that and say, what is the core of what I'm doing to these people that I can replicate to other such people? And that, in essence, sort of becomes your ICP, because what you're saying is there's a core set of people who got attracted to your product for whatever reason. They love it so much because they see the value in that product, and they love it so much that they might be the ambassadors. So doesn't it make sense to just literally double down on that kind of, whether it's a persona or a vertical or whatever it is that you're going after, and just really just hone that a lot, then start thinking about what else can I do, instead of saying, oh, okay, that's great. Like I'm getting, 50 customers in this particular vertical. Now I'll go jump into some other vertical and see if I can. Let's go figure out, can you make the 50 into 5,000 first, then go to the next one. So it is, unfortunately, it is, I do say discipline, and it is a hard one. You can code it into systems. You can make sure in Salesforce you're disqualifying. You can make sure that you are aligning commission plans. You can make sure there's a bunch of things you can do. I think it's more about having the conviction that you're going after this one thing first, and then you can have the optionality to expand into other things. The other thing I'll say is, a lot of the time, if you're selling into enterprises, a lot of the times your partners also give you very valuable feedback about who your ICP could be and where you can find immediate market traction. So I would integrate those signals as well and make sure that you're going after that set of customers that everybody is aligned, sees a lot of value.
So this kind of feedback may not necessarily come directly from your sales team, but maybe your technology partners, alliances.
Yep.
They might have those insights. Those are
Yeah.
great points.
Yeah.
Awesome. So those are some really good tips about how to narrow ICP. Again, easier said than done. Let's jump into the topic of AI. You're obviously in an AI company now. I also understand you're super duper excited about all the things that AI means for marketing today and the future. And I also notice you've coined some very interesting roles. Things like prompt marketer, forward deployed marketer, influence engineer. Now I can see why. I mean, just going back, like you started off as an engineer, so I can see some of the allure in these roles. But could you level set?
The bottom line is AI has forced all of us as marketers to really have to ship 10x faster, which didn't exist before. And I don't even know if it's 10x or 100x, to be honest with you. Sometimes I worry that there is no ceiling to that. So what it has done is really just ripped apart the traditional sort of heuristics that we all had about how long it took to do certain things. And it's compressed that in a crazy way. And so what that basically means is that we as marketers now have to rethink almost everything that we have to do. whether it's the stack or the processes or the accountability or the organization and the skills that we bring in, all of that stuff has to be rethought. Because if I have to now ship a landing page in 1 hour or a blog in 15 minutes, you have to have a significantly different way of doing it than in the past. So I gave this example recently of, in a previous company, I shipped a website in 9 months and spent about $2 million over it. And that was actually really fast. I remember so many people saying, wow, how did you actually do that? In this job, I've done that same in 5 weeks with 50,000. And so you can see this order of magnitude difference in how productive you can become and how fast you have to move. So that's probably the number one thing I would say is when I think about how marketing is going to change, is the sheer velocity of things that are going to happen.
The sheer throughput of things and how you then have to orchestrate yourself internally to make that happen. And I guess it's easy to fall into the trap of doing a ton of things without actually knowing whether or not they're moving the needle. When you see that you can do so much downstream, how does that change how you think about the strategic pieces?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I've been obviously thinking about it and tinkering with this idea a lot. I kind of start with this idea that you have to have the right people in place for you to be able to create throughput at quality levels. And what that means in my mind is you have to have this idea of a multi-threaded marketer, or if you remove yourself from marketing, it's a multi-threaded operator who basically brings together multiple disciplines and is able to orient themselves towards a specific outcome. So I want to be able to drive 30% more pipeline through inbound. You hire a multi-threaded marketer or train them up, and their sole purpose is to achieve that outcome. I don't care if it's through the website or if they write content. I don't care if all they do is sit on Reddit all day long and drive leads that way. Like, I really don't care. The outcome is 30% increase in inbound pipeline. So that's kind of the first starting point of doing this kind of piece. I'd say the second thing is, even with those type of people, you have to arm them with the right tools. And in September 2025, I mean tools, it's agents at the end of the day, right? With some SaaS workflows at some point. But you have to be able to give them the right kind of agents that they can actually help train and use. But you also have to make sure that all those agents are all working together, and there is the right kind of data is getting piped to the agents, the right kind of feedback is being given for the performance of the agents, and all of this works super seamlessly. Otherwise, you're going back to adding humans in the mix to solve broken workflows and broken problems. So one, it's super important to train people up in not just what is prompt engineering, which all of us, I think, do when we use ChatGPT and stuff, but what's the next level of prompt engineering, which is context engineering. And you need to have people who can really think about context engineering and use agents. And then you need to have an organization which can tie all that together on the back end to be able to get the right data. So it's kind of complex, and we are so early on in that journey. I'd say people start with hiring multi-threaded marketers or coaching up people to be that first, and then you can layer on all of these other things.
This is super interesting. So a few things that you said really stood out for me. One is that people like yourself, you have to start with becoming more outcome oriented, as opposed to, okay, I got a new job. I need one for demand gen, one for content marketing, one for product marketing, as opposed to understand what is the outcome we want to drive. And once you get alignment on that, the second piece is that in order to achieve those outcomes, what kind of multi-threaded people we need. And then a third very important piece that you mentioned is making sure that the organization has all the tools. In this case, you obviously are big on AI agents.
I think there's a couple of things. One is the CMO job is leveraging the existing agents that are out there, that are purpose-built for certain kind of, workflows or tasks or whatever that is. And then being able to bring it into the organization, make sure everybody is up and running on it and integrating it. That's one thing. But the second part of it is like, really, I would say you, as a CMO, you have to come up with what are the new ways or new workflows that have not existed before that you need. and what agents can help you with that. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of both.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So in the first case where I call this workflow to be deleted, by the way, like it's in the first case, it's you think about SEO. SEO was just such a programmatic way of getting your word out there and ranking top. And there's just a playbook for it, right? That has been honed over 20 years. And you have agents now that are built, by the way, on you.com that you can use to do that SEO. It's very simple, easy, make the right prompt, you off and running. When it comes to GEO or AEO, there are no workflows right now. You have to create the new workflows. Yes, you can leverage agents, but it's not as simple because getting visibility in LLMs is not a single variate problem. It's a multivariate optimization kind of a problem. You have to know where you're getting cited. You have to know what kind of content you have to build. You have to know what kind of user queries, which LLMs are pulling from what. You have to know this kind of multiple dimension of how to solve this problem. Can you solve it with a human and a SaaS workflow? Maybe, but it takes time. The linear machine that a SaaS workflow, like you produce the content, you put this out there and test it and produce content. It's linear. But with agents, you can probably do 100x at the same time on multiple surfaces, see what happens, and then sort of do it. Is there an agent today that does that? No, I don't think so. Unless I'm obviously missing a bunch of things. But an agent to help drive GEO will only be as powerful as the new workflow that you create for it. So that's the job of the CMO now, is back to your point, go figure out how you're going to rank or how you're going to be visible in LLMs. Figure out what the new workflow is. Figure out what these agents are. Figure out how to layer in the humans. Figure out what the feedback is. Figure out how all of that ladders up into your company strategy goals, which is either pipeline or reducing burn or whatever that is. So that's the job of the CMO.
Whether you like it or not, it sounds like LLMs are in the mix. You mentioned AEO, GEO a couple of times, Kady. I think some founders may not yet be familiar with it. So could you please elaborate a bit on what is AEO, what is GEO?
Yeah, I believe the industry is using them interchangeably. AEO is answer engine optimization, GEO is generative engine optimization. But the idea is, in the old world, consumers were searching on Google or Bing, and they would see 10 blue links with sponsored ads. And so what you had to do was try to optimize your website for those user queries. And you had a lot of different things. In the GEO world, when user search is migrating from browsers to LLMs, like, Perplexities of the world and OpenAI and all that kind of stuff. But in the LLM world, when a user looks for a query, there is a whole complex layer of things that happen behind it. The LLM, or if you come to you.com, for instance, we have a synthesis layer where we basically try to understand what is it that you're actually trying to answer. We stitch together a bunch of different things, whatever personal information you've shared with us, whatever. We rewrite the query in the way that we understand it. Then we route that to the right LLM for the right task to go look for information. These LLMs are through the search APIs and retrieve a bunch of information. The LLM brings it back, synthesizes it, re-ranks everything, and then spits out the answer to you, Vidya, that says, oh, okay, you asked about the latest car. Here's a bunch of things. And then if you're as a brand manufacturer of a car, if you're lucky, you're included in that search. And then a user clicks on that, goes to your website, etc. So GEO is very important if you want to be shown to the user at the time they're looking for something. And that is not as easy as just optimizing your website. It has a whole set of complex things that need to happen for you to be visible in LLMs.
Thank you for clarifying that. Given what you just mentioned and what we know today, Kady, as far as enterprise software purchasing is concerned, does it make any sense at all to spend on SEO?
Yeah, I still think so. I think, it's not as if 100% of searches have migrated to LLMs. And there are still people who are clicking on ads, who are looking on Google, and that I think will continue for a while. So you still have to have an SEO optimized website, and that feels like it's just basic hygiene. The difference is in the old world, you were trying to optimize for showing up in those 10 blue links. In this new world, you have to optimize for depth of content that LLMs want to go after. So in the old world, you would have maybe 5 pages that just hit on the keywords, and you would include that in your meta tags, right, that users are looking for. In the new world, you would have maybe 5,000 pages that address every single topic in extreme depth, so that the LLMs then are crawling your pages, they're looking at this information, they're synthesizing it, and then pushing it back. So the order of one, the way that you do things has changed. SEO is still a foundational element. On top of that, you need to have a different way of doing things.
And content is still king, it sounds like.
Content is even more
important
and more relevant in this world. It's funny, like I'm going to put in a plug for a tool called Brandlight, which is a GEO vendor, and they gave us visibility to what's happening. One of so there was one particular query that was being asked by a lot of different people, and that query was pulling from one source, which was in LinkedIn by this, honestly, a random person who had written this thing which was very beautifully structured, but it had 0 likes, the post, 0 shares, 0 anything. And this was informing almost 70% of one of the most important queries we had. So in a world...
Cross multiple LLMs, or was it one LLM?
Yeah.
Multiple LLMs.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So then when you think about, that's a random chance type of an event, right? So imagine how much of that you need to get out there so that you catch the LLM's interest, if you will, how you increase visibility. So content is even more important in this new world. There's a company called GrowthX that my friend is running, and he's made this his business model, which is creating content at scale and driving that forward. So I think this is, if you're listening to this, if you're a CMO or even in the product org, content is the way to differentiate, at least for a little bit.
We'll throw in the links for the companies that you mentioned in the comment section. So if I'm a startup founder, what you said sounds very interesting, but also quite intimidating if I have 0 people in marketing today. For people like that, what should they get started with? If they had budget to hire 1 person, Kady, who should that be? Content creator?
I would say think very carefully about what your main go-to-market motion is going to be. If your ICP is selling into CIOs, then your main go-to-market is probably an outbound focused go-to-market. If you're selling into SMBs, then your main go-to-market is probably inbound, heavily inbound. And depending on that, your needs for a marketer will change. I mean, ideally you would get this multi-threaded marketer, but right now there aren't that many. They're still kind of, on the journey, I think. So if you're an outbound focused company, hire either a product marketer or someone who has a spike in product marketing, or someone who can help with running events and sales collateral, sales support, because that's what you need to drive things forward. On top of that, you can obviously layer on a bunch of other things like content, website optimization. If you're inbound, hire a person who has a spike in growth marketing who can also do other things like product marketing, who can obviously lean into content, that kind of stuff. So hire someone who can flex into a lot of different things, or who has the hunger and the hustle to flex into things, but who has a spike in one area. Then you can start to expand from there.
Those are some very good tips. Thank you for sharing that. Switching topics, Kady, you mentioned about judgment once already. Founders who are new to marketing, how do you think they can build that?
It's a good question. I think it's to some extent that judgment comes with time, which is not a great answer for anyone listening to this. I would say having a very clear vision of what you want to build for the world, but also who you want to be in the world, I think is a very important thing. What is your identity? What do you want to own? How do you want to come across? That sort of sets the standard for what your brand is going to be, how you show up in the world, your aesthetics, your visual, design, and, that kind of stuff, right? There's that portion of it. Then as you sort of start to operate and execute towards things, almost invariably, you will have failures. You will learn from those mistakes. And a lot of the judgment basically is you've done that before, you failed and you learn better type of a thing.
Mhm.
So it's all battle scars, right? Judgment is basically battle scars. So going through those revs faster and faster and faster and aggressively learning from it, I think that really builds up your muscle of judgment quite a lot, the intuition. And then the third one is surrounding yourself with the right people. Like I advise a lot of founders right now, and it's amazing how many insightful questions they ask about what has happened. And you referenced this earlier. I've seen every stage of company from Series A to public company. So go find people like that who have the pattern matching to know what's coming next or what could come next. And then you can say, like, you get the benefit of someone who has made mistakes before, who's made the wrong strategic bets, or who has taken the right steps and who have seen that movie played out like 5 times type of a thing. And they can tell you what traps to avoid. And that also starts to build a little bit of this. I think the last one I will say, maybe this is a bit more, on the personal side, is I feel like the world, and especially me, we've got caught up in this FOMO phenomenon of everybody else is doing it, so I need to do it too. And sometimes it goes against my intuition, but I still go and do stupid shit because I think everybody is doing it. And I think staying true to yourself and having the courage to follow your intuition and even going against the grain sometimes and not following the herd, I feel like that is probably the most important thing of all of this to build that kind of intuition.
Those are all great points. And one of the things I just realized as you were sharing these things is that, especially with the velocity at which we all are able to put things out there, whether it be content and other forms of media, we can be prone to getting lazy and not actually noticing how these different pieces of content that we put out are doing. I mean, if you put one thing out once a week, it's one thing. But if AI is automatically able to do this for you 50 times a day and you don't even have to bother what it is doing, then you're missing out on learning cycles, right? So I think it's very important to learn and actually look at performance and then adjust based on that. And I think the other piece that you called out a few times is authenticity. And that looks like that's it's an evergreen foundational aspect of all things marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And the only other thing I'll add to what you said is I think also sometimes knowing where you need to really double down and spend the cycles to get it right versus the places where you're like, it's okay to ship this, doesn't matter, low fidelity is okay. Like having that kind of lens and that judgment is important as well.
Absolutely. I'll ask you one other question, especially since you're advising so many early stage founders. So we're still talking early stage startups, enterprise, B2B software, and I know how you like to delineate things between inbound and outbound. So let's call this the sales motion is mostly outbound. For companies like that, do you think it should be the sales leader that should be hired first or marketing? Or does it not matter?
I would say sales, yeah. I think developing an idea of a repeatable sales motion in the beginning is so important before you start layering on marketing, because in that instance, marketing is a sales accelerant. If you're completely unsure about who you want to target, where you want to go, and all that stuff, I think there's some utility to hiring the right senior marketing leader who can come in and help figure that out, because a lot of people are thinking market first. But in general, really high quality sales leader is the one that will help do that and put in the motions in place to build a repeatable sales engine. Once you have that, then you bring in a marketing team or marketing leader to help accelerate that and to go to market more and then start to diversify into other things. So that again, it's a very clear outbound type of a motion. If it's inbound, I'd actually suggest you bring in a marketer to help you define of the 500,000 SMBs that are out there, which of them are the most important ones to go after? How do you message? How do you make sure that you're creating the right product marketing and positioning so there's more inbound pull that's happening without you going out there and pushing it?
Those are great points. When it comes to actually troubleshooting what's going wrong, sometimes revenue is a reason an organization is having this conversation, but obviously that could be a lagging indicator. But let's say someone ends up in a difficult quarter and fingers are being pointed all
Yeah.
around the room, and there is marketing in the room,
Yeah.
who's obviously one of those people which people are always scratching their heads wondering
Yeah.
what is their value add. How should a CMO or how in general should one approach this issue when it comes to marketing?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good one. So I think if you're a CMO, you get to the end of the quarter and you're in a state where you're like, oh my God, we didn't achieve our targets. And then you start to put together a set of rationale for why, then you've kind of lost the battle. You've probably polish up your LinkedIn at that point. And honestly, this is also a little bit from my personal experience too. No, I think I think it's so important to if you're a CMO, you're responsible for certain amount of revenue that the company needs to generate. You have to be able to understand the levers of that revenue. Where is that coming from? How is that trending? And what do we need to do to course correct if it's not going in the right direction? So at the end of the quarter, nobody should be taken aback by where you ended up because everybody has had visibility throughout the journey. You're doing a lot of stuff to try to fix it, course correct, fail fast, whatever, and you're bringing your stakeholders along with you on that journey. And so that's the most important thing that you can do. I think a lot of the times when you walk into a new CMO role, it's, in the beginning, you won't have an impact, right? Like unless the business is taken off, you're going to have to help figure out what can be done, what should be doubled down on. You'll have tons of failures. You'll have one success for 9 failures kind of a thing. And it's so important to just keep trying and keep your stakeholders informed and also operate from the set of hypothesis of we think it's this. We've learned now that it could be this. So we are going to try something else. And the hypothesis here is we are trying this because of this kind of a thing. So back to your point of learning fast and learning quickly, that's what's going to happen. You didn't ask me this question, but I'd say if you're a founder, what happens in that scenario? I think, this is one of the things I was talking to a founder actually recently about it. I think it's always easy to make, in my opinion, it's easy to make personal changes because that's an easy thing to do. You can say,
hire someone, fire someone. Oh, yes. And
yeah.
I agree with you.
But does that actually fix the symptom? Is it a cause or a symptom? So you have to be very careful about understanding, is the reason we are not at the level of pipeline we want because of the person and their inability to adapt or, do that? Or is it because there is a product market fit problem and we are trying to jam a product into a market that doesn't want it or is not ready for it? So if I were a founder, if you got to that point, I'd take a hard look at what are we trying to achieve? What's the real cause? And then, of course, there are instances where you have to say, this is not the right person for the right fit because of whatever reason. And then you make the changes type of a thing. But I wouldn't rush to that as the first solution.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on. You're saying marketers should approach those as hypothesis of what is likely to work. So experiment with it. Let's just call it a hypothesis and see how it works. Let's all learn from that collectively and build that into the culture is one thing I heard you mention. And then the other piece you're saying is that, you want to have these conversations about how things are trending sooner than later. And have you, like Kady, in your experience, I'm wondering, as chief marketing orchestrator, which is how you see a CMO's, right? I love it, by the way, that you think the new CMO's role is. Have you seen these conversations happen from the CMO to the founder?
Yeah, I definitely push that a lot wherever I am. I think part of the CEO's expectation is always that their executives are giving them ideas of what needs to happen, but also bringing in their own judgment and that kind of stuff. So I sort of try to find this balance of I'm going to try these things because we think this is the thing, and what's your feedback and what do you recommend? And then there's always if we want to do this, we should do this based on my experience. So kind of finding that balance and pushing that conversation proactively, that has definitely helped me a lot. Or I would say I've not always done it, but what I'm finding is when I do it, I'm more successful because it creates alignment.
Yep, 100%. Alignment is so key in these situations.
Yeah.
Okay, we are coming to the close of this conversation, and I would love to ask you a couple of questions here. more rapid fire ones. So one is, what are some favorite books or, anything that you want to share with the outside world?
Yeah. So I have recently been hooked on to this author by name of Dr. Jordan Peterson. It's hard to describe. I mean, from the outside, it looks like it's a self-help kind of a set of books, but he has an amazing repertoire of neuroscience and psychology and mythology and history and anthropology that he draws from to sort of talk about the meaning of life and purpose of life and things like that. And that has deeply resonated with me. So that's one thing.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I have not heard of this author. It sounds like to me a little bit like Shane Parrish. He's written books on thinking mental models that borrows from different aspects of life. So it sounds very interesting. Thank you for sharing. My last question is obviously a lot happening. In fact, too much happening in AI, in marketing. How do you keep up with all of that? Any resources, any tips that people can borrow, steal from you?
Yeah, there's so many. Even in my own company, the guys I work for, Richard and Brian, they're the guys who invented prompt engineering, and they connected LLMs to search. And so they're premium AI researchers. So I learned so much from them, which obviously is not scalable outside. But I think, so follow Richard and Brian, that I would say, because they both are absolute amazing thinkers.
Where can people follow them?
Twitter, LinkedIn X. Yes.
Okay.
And then secondly, Lenny is a really good resource. I have this other thing called every.to. They write some really good things. The information is a really good source of stuff that's happening around the world, type of a thing. And then we talked about this, but Maven is going to be I'm going to have a course on it soon called Multi-Threaded Marketer, but Maven is a good resource.
That is awesome. When do you expect that to be out?
I plan to launch it in the next month, to actually launch the course itself sometime in January.
Love that. I'm definitely looking forward to that. We will post that as well. Well, Kady, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was wonderful catching up.